Hi, friends. Sorry for the technical. Let's wait for Harry Crane to join again. Very sorry about this. I don't know why people were not able to chat earlier. Can someone please say something in the comments so that I know it's working this time? Can someone please comment? Okay, comments works. Sorry about that, friends. Very sorry. Very sorry. Let's do this again. Normonics, we want to talk to Harry. You got it. It should happen in four, three, two, one. Guess who's joining? Hi, Harry. You're back.
Hey, how you doing?
Very
How you
sorry about
doing?
this. And Joe, if you want to jump in, feel free. You should be able to join. We'll get you to jump in too. So Harry, why don't you tell us about your excellent article attacking John? I'm not gonna butcher his name.
John
Please,
Ioannidis. Yeah,
John
John
Ioannidis.
Ioannidis. Well, again, I wouldn't say I attacked him. I'm responding to what he wrote, um,
Yes,
which is, I think, a pretty dangerous thing to say. Which is, and I think I linked it before, but I can try to link it again. But he was writing basically that this is all an overreaction, or it might be an overreaction. Um, and that we really need more data before we can be sure whether our response is appropriate given the risks, right? Um, and this is stuff that we've been talking about for a long time, right? Right for several months now, people have been talking about this, but now it's kind of shocking that people still don't kind of get it. I thought that we kind of turned the corner sometime last week, and everybody kind of realized this is serious. Um, but he wrote this article in a magazine, something called the Stat News. I'm not really sure how prominent that is, but it was basically saying we need more data before we can do anything else, and that this was not really so much a once in a century pandemic, but a once in a century data fiasco, was what he called it. So I wrote this one page response just to explain, um, what's wrong with that, and that we need to kind of be a little bit smarter about this if we want to actually, get rid of this thing.
that's right. So I remember that you had three main points in your article. Would you mind terribly much summarizing them and hammering it home?
Well, the three main points were kind of quoting from his art, not quoting, but summarizing his argument, or the main points that I saw in his article. The one was he made a lot of comparisons with the flu, basically saying, that the death rate right now, we're projecting the death rate to be a lot worse than the flu. But the death rates vary substantially depending on where you look at the data from. That in China, maybe the data was and I might be getting these backwards, but in China, maybe the death rate was 3%. But on one of the cruise ships that we saw, that came into port, the death rate was something like 1%. And there might be some other confounding factors there. And he kind of offered a very rosy picture where, there's a possibility that the death rate's actually something like 0.05%, um, which is much lower than the flu. And so that was one of the things he said. And really, these comparisons, as far as I understand it from what I've read, are unfounded. I mean, first of all, we do see a pretty high death rate. It's true that we're not probably testing most of the people who are sick, but um, for, forget about death rate. The people who get this disease say it's pretty nasty. So, the comparisons to the flu don't really seem to be, warranted there. He also, then he goes in to say,
Sorry,
basically
sorry.
the,
Would
yeah,
you
yeah,
would you mind terribly much? I'm just going to interject a small comment,
please,
which
please.
which is that he's far from the first academic types that I've seen. I've seen data scientists from talking to them who don't get the point. When WHO first came out, I believe it was WHO. I forget who it was, but they reported a range and they say, you know what? Guess what? The mortality rate could be as high as 3.4%, right? And this fellow complained to me saying, wait, but this is shoddy journalism because they forgot to report the range and it can be as low as say 0.05 to that would have been more accurate. And I told him, look, do you want to underestimate this thing or what's
Yeah.
safer, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and that's basically what he goes into. That he talks about we're operating under severe uncertainty, and so this is something he actually says: we have severe uncertainty, and the best case scenario is much better than the flu, and the worst case scenario, I don't even know how he puts this argument out there, but he says, even in the worst case scenario, this is only going to be as bad as the 1918 flu. Um, and but he actually says it won't even be as bad as that because, and that this is the words he used, back then in the 1918 flu epidemic, the people who died were mostly young, but this one is mostly hurting people who have, as he said, he quotes, limited lifespans or limited expected lifespans, um, which I don't know how you feel about that, but that's a little bit scary to think about.
It's yes, it's expected utility kind of thinking. It's very broken,
Yeah.
academically, intellectually speaking, but also ethically speaking. It's
Well, I
just
mean, yeah, mostly morally, ethically, yeah. Um, so that's a bit jarring, in the fact that he actually put that in print. But if your worst case scenario is actually the Spanish flu, I think that you've got a pretty good case to take precautions. Of course, he says that that's not the position he agrees with, but he said he does acknowledge that as a kind of on the outer limits of possibilities. And the last thing he says is that we just need more data to make sure that basically all the shutdowns we're doing, all the costs that we're incurring, basically with the economy and with shutting ourselves in our houses, we have to make sure that those are worth that cost is worth it, that the risk warrants the cost. Um, Otherwise, he says it's completely irrational what we're doing, right? And of
right.
course, I, I don't know how to put this. This problem with rationality. This is something that Cass Sunstein was talking about several weeks ago, worrying about being rational. I mean, would you rather be alive and irrational or dead and rational? I mean,
That
that's
that
simple trade off.
that's a classic Harryism right there. I love it. I love it.
And the other thing is, he wants more data to know whether or not this is the right decision. By the time you get the data,
It's too
it's
late.
over. You
Yeah,
know,
game
and
over. Exactly.
when the house is burning down, you don't stop to take its temperature, right?
Exactly. Nassim has this great analogy that he likes to use at Rory, which is, look, if someone yells at you, in Paleolithic time or even now, hey, a bear is running after us, run. Are you gonna stop and ask where's the evidence and ask for the data before you run, or do you just run?
Right.
It's yeah, it's
Um,
yeah,
yeah. I mean, that's what I wrote. I mean, I wrote it up last night. I didn't even want to do this because it gets exhausting constantly. It's like you have to constantly respond. But I was able to put it together pretty quick, and yeah, thanks for the help in revising it really fast. And it's about a page and a quarter. So yeah, people should spread that around. And there's it made me realize, I guess, I thought we were kind of past this because we've been kind of talking about this for the past month, right? Trying to tell people you got to get ready, you got to get ready. But
yeah.
apparently not. There's still people on the beaches in Florida.
Uh,
Um,
yep.
there's still people who don't really seem to get it. So I guess we still have to keep pushing because they only make it harder, right?
Exactly, and we have to do everything we can. I'm going to try to do everything, and that's the part of the point of this broadcast, right? Like I was telling you earlier, my little anecdote of running into my neighbors who are amused at me wearing mask and gloves, and this attitude is going to change very quickly, just like this, right? But until then, yeah, and we're trying
Yeah.
to warn them ahead of time, like, look, you got to take this more seriously. And the way I've been doing this is tell people, look, it's not about myself necessarily. It's about other people. Okay, I don't want to spread to your kids, your wives, and so on. And your elders. You got to think about this. Sorry. Before I digress too much, would you mind going through your second and third arguments?
No, those were the three. So I kind of
Got it.
summarized them. Those were the three. So the first one was that he's comparing it to the flu. The other one is that he's saying we have a lot of uncertainty. So it got to your point, which was that we have these big, let's call them confidence intervals.
Yes.
Um, right. And so really we're ranging anywhere from something that's better than, worse than the flu, or, what should I say? Less harmful than the flu, or something that's as bad as the 1918 flu. So it's such a wide range that we really can't make a determination at this time. And then, based on that, he says we just need to have more data, that, we could be underestimating the number of cases from anywhere from a factor of 3 to a factor of 300. And we won't know unless we have more data. I mean, again, I agree that we don't have a clue basically what the data says. How you doing,
E-
Jane?
Exactly.
But that's the point, right? That's the whole point. And so this is really related back to the thing I wrote. I don't know if it was last week or the week before, which was more in response to what Sunstein had been saying, and what he's been saying for 10, 20, 10, 15 years, which is this idea of being overly concerned with rationality, overly concerned with what the data tells you to do. And then, I mean, I think that we should all have taken a lesson from what almost happened in England, right? Um, you know,
Do you mean with the herd immunity, or what do you
yeah,
mean?
no, exactly,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah, yeah. It seems what the last I heard is that the UK government has finally changed its mind, looking around the neighbors. God knows what happened, but they seem to be at least changing their mind now. Let's hope
Well,
that.
I think what happened, or I actually haven't been following that too much over there, because I live here, but I did pay attention a little bit, and I think that there was a group of people at the Imperial College, or the University College London, one of the colleges, that actually released a paper that showed them that their estimates were off potentially by a factor of, that their policy would lead to about 250,000 deaths, and they had estimated that that would only cost about 10,000 deaths. Of
See,
course,
that's it.
you still get into this question of, they're estimating that their policy will cause 10,000 deaths, and they're okay with that.
Exactly. It goes into this very utilitarian kind of thinking, right? The
Yeah,
trolley kind of problem, which is how do we optimize for this? We assume that we can predict everything correctly. We know the upper bounds for sure, and there's no uncertainty in our parameters and our models, right? There's no humility involved. There's no epistemological humility. There's no thinking about, guys, what if we get this wrong? What if we kill more people accidentally by our wrong thinking? No such thing.
yeah.
Um,
So,
so, friends, sorry. Yeah,
yeah.
yes.
Go ahead, go ahead. Any questions, or who is anyone out there? Yeah.
Yes, yes, exactly. Let's open this to the audience. Friends, have you read the article? And even if you haven't read the
Oh, you can
article,
ask about anything, right?
yeah, exactly. Ask Harry anything. His article.
You really got to figure out a way. I mean, we'll do this again, right? But
Yes,
we got to have a way that we get the video
that's right.
going.
Like Grant said earlier, we might have to do Zoom.
Okay. I mean, I don't know. I've never done this before, but yeah. Um, Either way. Anyway, I'm reading some the downside of economic shutdown. Well, the downside is that the economy is going to collapse potentially, but I mean, I think that's kind of the that's not exactly my expertise, but I think that's kind of a secondary priority at this point. Um, we're doing everything we can to kind of keep things afloat, but you have to be kind of reasonable and take trade-offs. I mean, I think this is something. I mean, this is something I heard. Joe Norman's been talking about this for a month and a half, 2 months, but
Exactly.
he said this at least 2, 3 weeks ago, that if we can either we can shut it down right now and we can lose a little bit of money for 2, 3 weeks, or we can we can keep things around and we can lose 100 million lives, or all the money that comes with that. So when you think in those terms, it's a pretty easy trade-off.
EBI. We might. So EBI. Yeah, exactly. So sorry, friends. There's too many comments. We won't be able to answer everything. Talk about EBI. Look, I'm frankly not an expert. I know people like Nassim and Joe have been talking about this. EBI is a twist proposed by our friend Dijbajoy Chatterjee on the UBI idea, where the Trump administration is basically considering giving everyone $1,000 check. And EBI is the twist on the idea is that this shouldn't be permanent. This should be a temporary thing.
Mm-hmm.
People are going to devastating economic, shifts, potentially jobs lost, especially in the airlines industry, the service industry, and so on. And so this will be temporary relief. My reservations with that, besides being a permanent thing accidentally, is where's the money going to come from? I'm no expert, but the way I see it, we either print more money or we borrow more money.
What's EBI stand for?
Emergency basic income.
Oh, okay, I see.
It's a
Well, I
way of
mean, yeah,
reframing the thing.
yeah, I see. Um, yeah, well, I don't know anything about that except, I mean, obviously we've had bailouts before for big companies, so why can't we have bailouts for
That's
individual
fair.
people?
That's fair. But I also know friends who are, especially if you're us, one of our friends who are worried about continually bailing this out. I might be misrepresenting him, so I'll let him speak for himself. But again, we live in very unusual times. This is not the yeah. Nobody knows exactly what to do. Sorry, friends. Other questions?
Yeah, so well, somebody asked how I got into probability and
That's a good
math,
question.
and that's I guess that's a that's a good question, basic question. But I mean, that's I've talked about this in other places, but my interest in probability was always in gambling. And if you follow my Twitter, at least not today, not for the past couple of weeks, but I talk a bit about gambling, and in my writing, I reference that as well. But when I mean gambling, I mean actual gambling, risk taking, as opposed to kind of ludic fallacy. People need to learn a different terminology. I know that that's a popular one, but not everything is like that. So, real risk taking, and knowing when it applies and when it doesn't. And I guess that's one of the things that when I went in Sunstein's and in a lot of people's understanding of probability, they think only in terms of those kind of bet taking or gambling risk taking scenarios, but that's one specific application of it. There's a whole other range of possibilities, and so I try to, that was my first interest, but I'm interested in many more things, and I like to know when it applies, but also just equally well when it doesn't apply.
Someone liked. That's a great answer, Harry. Someone really read your book on network analysis.
Yeah,
It was great.
thanks. Write a review on Amazon. Yeah, thanks a
It's a
lot.
good idea. We should have another Periscope to talk about this UBI ABI thing. I believe people seem to really want to talk about it. We'll do that. We'll do that another time. I think that's a huge topic by itself. There needs to be an understanding that probability is not given the same weight in all cases. What do you mean exactly by that, Gordon?
Yeah, what does that mean? Is that that sounds kind of like what Kahneman probability weighting?
Yeah, I'm not quite sure what he means by that exactly. We'll have to wait for his clarification. But yeah, you're right, Harry. I mean, there's a lot of people who think that they can model the real world, especially fat-tailed domains, using this very closed world, very simplistic. It's almost like playing a game of chess where you can use a supercomputer to reason through everything, a large decision tree, and come up with a perfect optimal answer. The real world isn't like that. Mother Nature throws you monkey wrenches all over the place, and when you make a mistake, the mistake can be fatal.
Yeah, well, that's the thing that I've always wondered. Is 99.9%, probably more, 100% actually of the applications uh, that people apply statistics to can't really be verified, whether the model's any good or not. And I'm talking about scientific research. You could be doing hard science, with the exception of maybe physics, though. There's so many other variables you're not able to account for that the models are really, they shouldn't be taken too, they can't be taken literally at all. They're just there as kind of a heuristic at best. But there's no stakes for being wrong, because there's not even a sense of what's right and what's wrong in those cases. You kind of but this is a different story, right? And so anyone, I think, who's ever been in finance, or in my case, in any kind of gambling or any kind of risk taking situation, knows very well that you might have a model, but the model, the first rule of modeling, as far as I'm concerned, is don't trust your model.
Right.
You can have a model, that's fine, but that's kind of a starting point. That's not the end point.
Mm-hmm.
And it sounds like the people in the UK were kind of taking their model a little bit too literally. And I guess the second part of modeling, I guess, that I would think is, I really only believe my model for the bad stuff. Um, if my model spits something out that's really not what I want it to spit out, then I should be concerned. But if my model says something that's really good for me, then I have to start to question the model, because it's always about being more conservative uh, to avoid those catastrophic circumstances. And I think this is kind of unfortunately, but something like this that happens once every 10 years or really once in a century, really brings that home. And
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
yeah, so I mean, I think that there's a long-term risk here, that we have a short-term risk, which is this virus. I think there's a real long-term risk, and I've actually been saying this for a while, and I think it might actually happen. All the stuff with AI, and I mean, you would know a lot about this from a different perspective. Our next crisis, or whether it's 50 years from now, might be 100 years from now, might be 5 years from now, but it very well may be caused by something like AI. And I'm not talking about some kind of singularity or anything crazy like that.
Sure. Yeah.
But just this over reliance. I mean, this pandemic is as much caused by a virus as it is by our, the connectivity, the global connectivity, um, and our reliance on algorithms will eventually lead to something that we didn't anticipate. That's for sure.
Exactly. I was thinking about this today. Earlier, I said that software is going to save so many lives, and I realized it's yes and no. Software is also partly what led us here. We tend to, this online monopolies, but I don't know whether they directly led, but software helped to create this over optimization of flights, finding the cheapest flights, and so on. Right? We made flights too cheap and too frequent for everybody, which in some ways is great, but then you have this huge downside to it. And now I hear that we're bailing out airlines instead of letting them fail. And it's a very controversial thing because some people are saying, what are you going to do about all the employees who are not directly responsible for this? It's the C-suits maybe, but not the employees. And it's a
Yeah,
tough question.
no, it's tough.
Yeah. Connected will increase the risk of, does it also increase power of cooperation? Yes, but right now, I mean, look, the internet is helping us to cooperate, but right now we're talking about the downside. That's what we're worried about right now.
Yeah.
Harry was tweeting about high leverage point yesterday. Maybe he has more to
Yeah,
say on
Mike,
that.
I don't have a ton to say about that. The point there is, if you look at the data, if you look at the picture of the data, it looks like noise to me. And you take a bunch of noise and you draw a line through it and you say that there's a trend. Is there a trend or isn't there a trend? I have no idea. But if you look into that paper, the model they fit, again, this gets to what I was saying earlier. You can fit a model to anything, and if there's no ground truth, as there is no ground truth in this case of whether the virus is less contagious in a hot temperature. There's no ground truth there.
Right.
We're not going to know that, and we might never know that, but we certainly
Hmm.
don't know it now. So you fit a model and it says that it is. Um, that analysis is not, you know, completely rigorous or robust. It's a possible theory, but it's not one you can rely on. That's for sure. Uh,
Exactly. It's a modern form of astrology, as Nassim would say. We want the numbers. People are desperate for answers, and we're turning to a scientific, pseudo-scientific form of astrology, where we're placated by looking at any number at all, as long as it's spit out by a computer, and it must be right, right? A computer said so.
yeah,
Can't be wrong.
and you account for the variables you think matter, but of course, like we're seeing in this case, how many variables there are. There's always the unknown unknowns, and also the model they fit was very simplistic, so it's almost guaranteed that they were leaving stuff out, and it's a complex question to begin with. So that's what I was saying there. Yeah.
Exactly. So thanks, Harry. I think this is pretty good. I don't want this to keep going too long. That's just
Yeah.
my
Well,
gut
I
feeling.
could talk for hours, but we'll save it for another time.
Yes, yes, let's do that. We'll talk about friends. Please suggest future topics that we should talk about. We'll try to make this a regular thing. Harry should definitely start periscoping. I think he's a perfect guy to do this. Thanks, Harry. Thanks very much for
All right.
joining
Well, yeah.
joining
Thanks
us.
for having me. Have a good one. Be safe out there,
Thanks.
everybody.
Thanks, guys. See you. See you.
Thanks for
Bye now.
showing up, everybody.